Shortly after the Bureau of Labor Statistics announced this morning that the U.S. economy had added 254,000 jobs, beating expectations, Senator Marco Rubio of Florida went on Twitter and said, "These are fake numbers." I am so mad. I can hardly speak, but I wanted to make a few things clear. And also to say that for people who are upset as I am, there is a silver lining here. So a few things to make clear. One, this is a statistical agency that has a method for using data in a sample to estimate numbers in our economy. They are not perfect, and they are not required to be perfect. If they get something wrong, they then issue a correction saying, here's how we think we got it wrong. That is the paragon of integrity and accuracy and transparency, to not only try their best and show us their methods for their first estimation, but then say, great news, we got more information and we have an even better estimate for you. Just because their estimates are revised on a monthly and annual basis and have been for, I don't know, about 40 years, and you only just paid attention to it 3 months ago because it's the middle of an election, that does not mean that they're lying. There is a world of difference from we are trying our best and we slightly missed the mark, but then we improved it when we found it, versus we are making up numbers for political gain. And the fact that he would accuse them of the latter on Twitter is remarkable. And it's remarkable for a couple of reasons. Reason number one is that he's a sitting U.S. senator. If he was actually concerned about the procedures of a federal agency, he could just call them in front of Congress. He could call a hearing or have one of his colleagues call a hearing. He could bring the commissioner in front of him and say, how reliable are these numbers? This revision was a lot. It was scary to me. Are these actually reliable statistics? And what they would explain to him is that, yes, they are reliable statistics, but that the BLS would like to modernize. And in fact, the Census Bureau and the BLS have been asking Congress for years to give them money to modernize their statistical abilities, to collect better data, to have better estimates. And Congress, Marco Rubio among them, have denied them that ability. And in fact, they are undermining the very statistics that they are later accusing of political machinations. Meaning that not only are they not properly funding the BLS, but they're using the doubt sowed in that maneuver to politically gain from it. That is cowardly. I don't actually think he's going to do that, though, because I don't think he believes us. I think he just wants to throw civil servants and the people who work at the BLS under the bus and accuse them of some pretty illegal activity simply because he wants to personally profit from the anger that comes from lying to people. It's a really cowardly move. He's a sitting U.S. senator. He just accused federal employees of lying. It's not just a tweet when you're in power. The silver lining to all of this is that in this tweet, he has joined a truly loathsome group of people, but he's got a permanent membership among them, which are people that have wrongly accused the BLS of political interference because the BLS presented them with information that was inconvenient rather than inaccurate. And it's easier to attack the source when you don't like what they're telling you. And there are, essentially two groups of people that he gets to join in this. The first is from the early 1900s, the second commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is has such a fascinating history. It predates the Department of Labor, the Census Bureau, and the Bureau of it predates most of the federal agencies we have. We needed to collect data on how the American worker was doing. And we needed to collect that data because strife between workers and factory owners was so rampant that we had to have less speculation and more information about what was going on. Well, in the early 1900s, part of the investigation of the Bureau of Labor Statistics were into women and children who were working throughout the United States, and the employment of Black workers throughout the United States. What wages did they earn? How were they treated? Was it fair? The second commissioner of Bureau of Labor Statistics, Charles Neal, oversaw a multi-year investigation into the employment of children, how much they were paid, whether it was in violation of the meager labor law that existed at the time, and what the result was. What Neal's investigation found, which had used hundreds of researchers and fact finders throughout the U.S., was that working conditions for children were absolutely the worst in the South, that they were paid the least there, that they were the youngest employed there, and that they had the worst working conditions. Southern Democrats hated Neal. His BLS had been also giving money to W.B. Du Bois and other scholars to find out information about Black workers, both in the South and in the newly industrialized North, where they were moving in the first Great Migration. Congress wouldn't give Neal the money to study it from the BLS directly, so he gave it in re-grants to Du Bois. The Southern Democrats hated him. So when he went up for reconfirmation for his next term, Wilson sent him to the Hill, and Southern Democrats said, "You are an inveterate liar and you are biased against the South." So he said, "Prove it." And he encouraged Congress and Wilson to hire a law firm to independently review the study on child labor that had made Southerners so mad for calling out how they treated children. And he just sat there and was like, "Yep, you can look at everything that I did. You can talk to everyone that I talked to. We aren't biased. You're just pissed off at what I found." And that's exactly what happened. The law firm cleared him of any type of bias, said that he acted with the utmost integrity, that these statistics were reliable and important, and that the Southern Democrats were wrong. He was reconfirmed and resigned 2 weeks later. He always knew he was going to leave. He only went through the confirmation process because he wanted to make sure that the precedent was set, that the Bureau of Labor Statistics acts with independence and integrity and would not bow to political pressure to come up with better numbers just because Southern Democrats were mad. So, Marco Rubio, first group of men you join are Southern Democrat defenders of illegal, low-paid child labor in cotton mills. Welcome. Second person in this group is Richard Nixon, who in the 1960s was very upset that the unemployment rate wasn't lower than the BLS reported because he thought the economy was doing better and became convinced that the head of the Federal Reserve, whom he had appointed, and the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics were part of a Jewish cabal that were out to get him and manufacturing numbers as part of their I'm not going to say the actual phrase because it's so hateful, but yeah, he was a deep anti Semite, and he had a White House staff member go to the BLS and count the number of people there that were Jewish. Guy just looked at their names, reported back, and Nixon worked to have them fired, reassigned, or demoted so that there would be less Jews at the BLS because that's the reason why the numbers coming out were bad. This is such a shameful chapter in U.S. presidential history. It's caught, all of it's on tape from his files. You can go look up the exact transcript of, you know what I'm talking about. And afterwards, there was, huge movements to protect the BLS from this type of interference and bullying. A lot of them were passed in the early 70s as a way to have more independence and integrity because politicians, when numbers don't go their way, they get nasty. For the most part, politicians followed this type of separation between the BLS and the numbers that came out, until this election campaign when the economy is doing much better than Republicans want. And so their only option is to attack the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Marco Rubio being a sitting senator and doing so is just such a low point for Congress, kind of similar to Nixon's counting of the Jews in the White House. I mean, obviously different degrees because Nixon had more authority. Rubio's not exercising his. He's just wanting to make noise. But there is something comforting to me that this is where he sits now, right? Like this tweet is going to be printed out and like put up on the wall of a museum of this is what it looks like when you are afraid of numbers. I don't really like the attacking of civil servants who are doing their job. It's such an underhanded, low thing to do. But the important thing to remember, and what seems to be lost on Senator Rubio, is that there is no future built on lies. And the more lies that you tell, the less of the future you get to have a part of because it doesn't come from you anymore. There are no solutions without accurate assessments of the problem. And there is no lie that becomes reality. It is sad for me to see someone like a sitting U.S. Senator fall so low. But I promise you, if we were to rank these people in 20 years, the BLS will be ranked so much higher than him, and he will look cowardly and low, as he was this morning when he accused them of fabricating numbers. And if there's some comfort in that for you, there's some comfort in that for me. On Friday, Senator Marco Rubio accused the Bureau of Labor Statistics of producing a fake jobs report. I appreciate that in the video I made about it, so many comments came in that were genuine, that were curious, that had, just real questions about what's going on with the Bureau of Labor Statistics and why they're talking about these revisions. So in this video, I will talk about revisions to the BLS statistics. I'm just going to take a note and say that if you find yourself wondering why you have to learn about how the Bureau of Labor Statistics conducts statistical revisions to its initial estimates because you didn't want to be here, I empathize. I don't want to be here either. I just wish this institution was trusted the way that it should be, but their procedures have now been politicized and then grossly mischaracterized and is being used to manipulate people. So here we are. Now this is something that you have to understand. Let's start with easy stuff though. The Bureau of Labor Statistics job is to produce estimates that describe numerically what is going on in our economy. They have to be as timely and as accurate as possible to conflicting notions. If someone brings up to you the revisions to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, you could tell them one, the methodology for revising estimates from the Bureau of Labor Statistics has not changed since 1979. What has changed is whether or not politicians are paying attention to the number that comes out in the revision. So attention does not predicate behavior. They are doing what they have always done. The second thing you should tell them is that everything is above board at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. All of their procedures, how they update, every single version of an estimate that has ever come out, you can go get, as well as an explainer of what changed between the months of the estimates coming in. So it's not like if they had changed the way that they calculate the unemployment rate 3 months before an election, I would be in shock. But of course, they would never do that because they're a deeply apolitical agency that does not want to come under fire from politicians. And so they do everything they can to even avoid the appearance of being political, which is why they would never do something in an election year. So let's go on a journey together. We found out on Friday that 254,000 jobs were added to the economy. How is that number going to change? It's going to change like 5 times in 2 ways. The first way that it's going to change is that the survey that the number is based on, the current establishment survey, will get more responses over the next couple of months. And so that number will have 2 monthly revisions reflecting that the survey has come in. Basically, the Census Bureau sends 120,000 employers who have among them 650,000 employees a survey asking, for this specific week of the month, how many people were working for you and what did they make? Some people take a minute to send in the survey, right? It'll come back with a note that's like, sorry, this has literally been sitting on my desk for a month. Love, employer. And the Census Bureau, when they get more, responses, they'll update the numbers based on those additional responses. And so these are the first 2 revisions. So that $254,000 jobs added to the economy in September, in the October release and in the November release, which correspond to the first week of November and December, respectively, that number will be changed twice. And this is referred to as the monthly revisions. And here for your viewing pleasure is the sum total of those 2 monthly revisions going back to 1979. This took me about a minute to download. Again, props for their transparency and integrity. What you can see from this, I put up the entire series basically so you could see that it's noise. Like, this is a lot of noise. Sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down, sometimes it's large, sometimes it's small. When you look at the whole scale of since 1979, the first 2 revisions to the monthly job estimate, it could go either way and it'll probably be pretty small. The exceptions to that are, and this is important, during recessions, the revisions tend to always be downward, and 2, they tend to be larger than they are otherwise. This means that the downward revision of monthly data is itself its own kind of economic indicator. But our journey's not done. This is the end of the survey data. We got the initial estimate, it was revised twice, and now this current establishment survey is put to bed. We now have a whole other source of data called the quarterly census of employment and wages. It is based on tax receipts that employers pay on all of their workers. This is not a survey, this is a census. It is just the copy of your tax record for all 155 million jobs in the United States. It takes a long time to go in. This number, the quarterly census of employment and wages number, will itself go through revisions as more tax records are filed. So it'll have its own initial estimate that is then revised as more records come in. And then in the final 2 revisions, these 2 data sets are reconciled, where the number that came from the survey and the number that came from the census are then put together. And they do this twice. They say, here's the preliminary estimate of how much we think it's going to be different. And then here's the final estimate of how different they actually are, in which we will take this difference and allocate it through the past year. What we just found out was this penultimate preliminary benchmark revision of how different the survey of employers and the census of employers is. It was a really large downward revision. Well, it made the news because, again, that tends to only happen during recessions. I put up here the prior final revisions to the data that have occurred. So it stops in this is from 2017 to 2023. It stops in 2023 because 2024 isn't done yet. We just have the preliminary. But this is the change to the monthly employment number of jobs estimate based on the benchmark revision. So what you'll notice again is that it's small, but it tends towards positive. It tends to be that the survey undercounts and the census kind of brings up the survey, with the exception, and this is why I zoomed in, is that you can see in 2020 it's all negative, because in recessions, revisions tend to be downward. So sometime in around September of next year, we are going to find out how much all of the surveys from 2023, including our 254,000 estimate for 2024, how much all of the surveys from 2024 and all of the tax records from 2024 differed. And then in around sometime between January and March of 2026, we will have a final number for how many jobs were created last month. That is the end of the journey. Jobs numbers are revised downward typically when we're in recessions. So the reason why this preliminary benchmark revision to establishment survey numbers was important this time around is because we have been in economic purgatory for 2.5 years, wondering if the economy is going to tip into recession in order to fully fight the effects of inflation. This has been the question for 2.5 years. Are we going to head into a recession? Not only descriptions of the economy, but how those descriptions change are their own economic indicator. A downward revision is another mark on the column of we might be in recession. This preliminary revision came out at a really key time in between meetings of the Federal Reserve when they could drop interest rates. That's why it had so much legitimate attention paid to it, because it was another piece of evidence to take to the Federal Reserve to say, you have pushed the labor market to the brink. You have to drop interest rates, and why so many people latched onto it, either as a predictor of a recession or another warning that one is on the way. But unfortunately, conservative talking points jumped on it and said it's actually fabricated data. You have never paid attention before to statistical revisions to data because they're not interesting and the methods don't change. The only reason why people legitimately paid attention now was because they were worried it meant that we were in a recession. And then conservatives who know better jumped on this to manipulate how people feel about statistics coming from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. All of it is banking on the fact that you would never watch a 9-minute video explaining to you where the revisions came from, and you would accept basic lies that people would cook the books to help the economy because they assume that you would never take the trouble to understand.